Much like this cell phone battery, which is stored energy, knowledge is stored information. Now, if I take my cell phone and try to power it up, it will not become empowered by the stored energy in my other hand. Not until I plug it in toward a specific purpose will it become empowered. Likewise, you've stockpiled plenty of knowledge and information throughout your life, but it will not empower you until you plug it in and turn it on.
Hey everyone, welcome to the RLT podcast, where we share some real life tools, tips, and tricks to help you not only discover, but also reach your ultimate goals. What's up everyone? Welcome to the 5th episode of the RLT podcast. My name is Mono.
My name is Leon. How are you doing everyone? It's our 5th episode. We're very excited. I hope you've been enjoying the episodes so far. We've certainly been enjoying making them.
Yeah, exactly. So, we've probably heard this message a million times before, or the saying at least, of knowledge is power, Leon, and I'm pretty sure you've heard it just as many times as I have. And so this isn't the first time that I've actually heard this specific saying delivered in a talk, or seen it on a billboard, or read it in a book somewhere. And one certain thing that stuck out to me in this specific clip is the fact that he asks a question. It's not saying that knowledge is power, but actually asking the question of, is knowledge power? Should we challenge that motion? Should we dive deeper into that topic? And I think that's what inspired the show of today, is to say, well, how can we deep dive into that discussion in itself to find out what exactly does one mean when you pose it in the question form, right, Leon?
No, definitely, for sure. As you said, knowledge is power is quite a common thing. We hear it all the time, and we decided to actually have a discussion around this and ask the question, is knowledge really power? Maybe debunk some myths tonight, discuss it at length, and then see what comes out at the other end. At the end of the day, the reason myself and Mano finds this extremely an enticing type of topic is because we find ourselves constantly trying to, acquire more knowledge in some shape, form or the other. I'm sure a lot of people are similar. So I decided, to start actually taking note of what type of knowledge I'm putting in my head. It's obviously changing as the season changes. If you've got certain seasons of your life, for example, if you're going through pain, you'll start reading more books about life advice and things like that. If you're going through starting a new business or something like that, you'll actually start reading some entrepreneurship books. If you're going through some academic times in your life and you're acquiring new skills, you'll obviously read subject matter with regards to that. So knowledge absolutely is something that's always around us. It's something that enhances us. But we're actually here tonight to actually debunk the whole method of thinking about knowledge as power. You can't, just saying that knowledge is power. What do we actually mean by that?
Yeah, for me specifically, Leon, I think that's where one of the many things that drew our friendship closer as well is in the sense that we've got that in common. We absolutely love learning new things. We absolutely love sharing knowledge with one another. And it's something that just had such a major impact on my life. The fact that I heard this saying at a very, very young age. And my gran always told me, I'll never forget this, that you should read. And when you're done reading, you should read more because knowledge is power. She always used to explain it in a sense that people can take things away from you, but they can never ever take away your knowledge. They can never ever take away what you've learned. So go out, go study, become a doctor if that's your passion. But really consume as much knowledge as possible, because that's the one thing that the world cannot take from you. They can take your personal possessions, they can take your money, they can take everything away from you, but they cannot take your knowledge. So that's something that you take with you for the rest of your life. So that's something that has inspired me from a very young age to actually become more knowledgeable and try and build up this wealth of knowledge in each and every aspect of my life. And that has been something that I've been carrying along with me throughout primary school, throughout high school, all the way still to this day. I'm absolutely obsessed with learning new things and understanding the way that the world works, understanding everything that I require for my day job, but also understanding life better, understanding business better. So that has been something that has absolutely stuck with me. So I'm very, very excited to actually touch on this topic today and how my mind has been changed since I've heard this saying being posed in a question, not necessarily just in this one TED Talk here presented by Damien. And by the way, we'll share the link to the full TED Talk in the show notes if you're interested in going and having a look or listening to that entire TED Talk there. So we'll absolutely be sharing that with you.
Yeah, for sure. So let's flip the script a little bit. So let's say, for example, now I need to do the math in my head, but let's say 17 years ago, I just gave away my age, Monday. We were all in school, or I was in school at the time, busy with matric. I decided to be one of those overachiever kind that's going to take a couple of extra classes as well, and acquire knowledge, and then get a little paper at the end of the year that tells me that I am now knowledgeable in 7 or 8 different topics. Some of those topics, for example, science. I'm not hating on any science people. I wish I had the brain for absorbing that kind of information. It's just not my forte. But I had science, and science was one of the subjects that I needed to pass in order to get the correct scoring that's going to allow me to study at the set universities that I wanted to go and study at. So I studied my sciences. I barely passed, and I was able to go and study wherever I wanted because I passed my science. But ask me anything about my matric science right now, I promise you, I think I can remember that iodine is purple. I might even get that wrong. I think copper goes green when it goes bad. That's what I remember. That's all I remember. So knowledge being power, that's where the question kind of fades a little bit. So if you, for example, learn all these new things, and sometimes it's forced learning, like in the school system. One day we'll have a show about what we think about traditional school systems. But they force a lot of information down you or upon you, and then they also put the frameworks in place that makes you forced to do them. For example, like I just said, if you want to go and study engineering, you have to have math and sciences. Even though you're never going to go, for example, my brother went and did engineering. He's never ever touched barium chloride and these kind of things in his life ever again. But he had to go and pass sciences at a reasonable higher grade level in order to gain access to the class. So not only do they force knowledge on you for 12 years of school and high school, but they also put the framework in place that makes you have to do it. Otherwise, you can't go and actually study something in that direction that you want to go and study in. So tonight we're actually going to talk about this a little bit about, there's so much knowledge that we've gained over the years, and what we decide to do with it is what actually matters. And that's that knowledge isn't necessarily power. Applied knowledge is power, and knowledge put into action is power. So you can read books, you can listen to podcasts, you can do all of these things. And listen, I'm guilty by association, absolutely. I mean, I've been binging podcasts for years now, and I promise you, I can probably remember 10% of it. So for me, it's a volume game. I listen to so much podcasts that eventually I build up knowledge because I don't have photogenic memory. I don't remember everything I hear. But if I hear enough of it, I eventually remember enough so that I can actually make a story about it. So that's my approach, and everyone's approach is different. But at the end of the day, the point I'm trying to make is I do that so that once I've got that 10% maybe equates to 5 or 10 books worth of knowledge that I can then remember so well that I can use it in my daily life. So for example, just to put it into something more tangible for the audience to understand, for some time I was put in a leadership role, and I had to lead a team of engineers. And I needed to quickly find out exactly how the heck do I do this, because I've never been a leader in my life before. I was quite privileged to be quite young, and leading a team of my own. And I decided, okay, cool, I'm going to just put my head down into books and I'm going to start reading. And I read a hell of a lot of books. I mean, I know they say CEOs read 52 books a year, once a week, they read a book. I think I would have beaten them. And I can't tell you whether it really helped, but what I can tell you is I read enough so that I could start making and taking the best out of all the different books and make up my own little, let's call it my own plan for what I think good management is. And I actually started realizing very early on, and we'll have a separate talk about this, but I was never really a born manager. I feel management is such a, again, I'm cognizant of the fact that we have managers on the show, but that hopefully they'll relate with what we're trying to say. And management is quite a dictatorship type of role. It's someone that can enforce authority onto people and get out of them certain results. I'm a little bit more of a leadership type of person where I would rather perform in a way and have actions of a certain way where people naturally want to follow. And just kind of leading by example. But anyways, like I said, that's for another day. But I only had a method on how to approach my management role or leadership role after taking upon enough knowledge. And it's really that you think it's intuitive to just know how to be a leader. It absolutely isn't. And I know there's a lot of people that are called born leaders. Yes, I do agree that that's an acumen that you can be born with. But not all of us are that lucky. But we all end up at some stage of our development in our careers, we end up in some form of leadership. And then you need to understand how to do it and what are the right moves and how do you motivate people and how do you get them to perform at their highest potential? How do you get more out of people that don't see themselves as being good enough and so on. But anyways, so it's all about then acquiring the knowledge, taking the knowledge. So like I said, what I did is I absorbed a lot of knowledge, or let's say I consumed a lot of knowledge. I only absorbed some of it. And I only chose the stuff that was relevant to me, that resonated with me, and that I knew speaks to my character and my person. And that's how I basically applied my knowledge. So knowledge in itself is not power. Knowledge is just information that's around, but you haven't actually decided what to do with that knowledge.
Yeah, and I think even in saying that as well, it reminds me of my most recent journey as well. We've spoken a little bit more about, in the past about my investment ideas of going into real estate and, becoming a landlord, or basically doing that on such a large scale that you start generating passive income. But to me, that was just something that I came across and it just really resonated with me. And I started deep diving into all of the books that I could find. For me, it was not necessarily just reading books, but also downloading audiobooks as well, listening to audiobooks on Audible in the car as I drove to work and back, and basically just flooded myself with a ton of information surrounding everything that I could find on real estate and property investment, and what are the different strategies and all of those things, which is all good and well. I mean, at some points I repeated listening to the exact same book maybe 3 or 4 times. When we get to that part, maybe in one of our other episodes, I'll share some of the knowledge with you, or share some of the books that I came across that really helped a lot. But with that being said, Leon, I think we've chatted about this a lot, and you've actually tuned me about this a couple of times. The fact that I am someone that I'm an overthinker, right? I suffer from analysis paralysis, and I'm definitely not oblivious to the fact that I do from time to time. And that is one thing, as the best example that I have in my own life. For the last 1.5 years, maybe 2 years even, I've been studying everything, because I feel that knowledge is power, in the sense that if I know everything there is to know about how to negotiate deals, how to find the best deals, how to analyze the numbers, how to do it as quick and as efficient as possible, I can spend 2 years on studying all of that stuff. But to this day, Leon, have I bought a house?
No,
I haven't yet. Not yet, right? So that is something for me in my personal life that I'm still working on. I mean, it's absolutely, even though I understand it, even though I've come across this saying, knowledge isn't necessarily power, but applied knowledge is. It still is very, very difficult to apply that to my own life and to live by it as well. So in that sense, it is quite apparent that you can consume as much information as possible for as long as possible, but not even use it to your advantage, right? In my one case as well, I mean, if I had to think about just my career in itself, I planned that out strategically. The way that I entered the career that I'm currently sitting in and all that was a strategic move that I made when I was maybe 18 or 19 years old, working my first job. I had to actually start deciding where is this all going, right? I took a year off to try and find myself. I didn't necessarily, so I took a gap year. I didn't necessarily have, the means to go and study, to go to university. And plus, even if I did, I didn't really know where I was going to go, right? Or what I was going to go and study. So for me, I just took a gap year. It started my first job. And shortly in that period, in that first year and a half after, out of high school, I discovered this path of where I wanted to go with my career. And from there on out, I started consuming only knowledge that would be able to be applied to that career path that I would choose for myself, right? So in that case there, I must say that it did help me narrow my focus down, because we are living in this day and age, once again, that we are consumed with so much knowledge, so much information. So we can now go and get sidetracked with courses for little to no money, maybe even a free subscription for X amount of months, and you can consume all of that knowledge, but it might become overwhelming at some point, or it might just be a waste of time if you're not really focused on where you're directing that knowledge to. So for me, I started actually focusing my knowledge or focusing my research and studies all around what my end goal was. And for me, that is one aspect that actually has paid off in my life, because I could actually take that knowledge, apply it in my real life scenarios, and progress my career up to the point where it is now. But to try and ask myself the question, why am I consuming this knowledge?
Yeah, absolutely. You touch on something very important there. Usually when I go on a knowledge binge, it's because something in my life is going on. So, for example, I just mentioned, for example, a new job, right? But let's say, for example, I want to start bonsai plant trimming. That's random. I've got a bonsai, but it grows by itself. I've never tried to trim it. But let's say, for example, you want to do something like that. So how knowledge works is you're going to start maybe Googling around. And yes, absolutely, very, very easy to obtain a lot of information. YouTube, I find, is a very, very good source of information. And because it's visual, it sticks. Books is still my favorite. I mean, leaders are readers. So it's a very good, generally, it's just a very good, I would say, habit to read, to find time to read. But at the end of the day, it's all about applied knowledge. Now, how do you actually retain the knowledge? It's actually through that application. So many people are like me, where they'll consume information, and now I'm going to probably hopefully touch on a lot of people that's listening in the audience. You'll consume knowledge, and the very next day you can only retain maybe 10, 15%, 20% if you're lucky on a good day, if you had coffee. And the problem with that is that you end up spending a lot of time to acquire let's call it, it's almost like low bandwidth. It's you spend so much energy and so much time for little in reward as far as knowledge is concerned. Now, where the switch really flips is when you start having to apply that knowledge. That's only really when you start retaining that knowledge. So the more that you can actually apply that and use that knowledge, that's when it works. So if we take my bonsai plant analogy as an example, if you start reading about how to trim at a specific angle, and you snip at a specific part of the branch to make sure that it sprouts two new, I don't even know what you call it, let's call it branches. That's something visually in your head that you can't really understand just by reading, even from watching a video, until you start doing it and you prune and you play around and you see the results. I promise you, as soon as you see the results of your actions that you got from knowledge, you'll never forget it. it then automatically becomes cemented as a part of your skill set. So knowledge is something that you need to put into action. As soon as you put it into action and you put enough action, you become a master of that knowledge, and that means that it's part of your skills. It's something that makes up part of your personality, part of your character as a human being. So it's absolutely important to understand that, just consuming books and reading and watching, TED Talks, for example, and I mean, we're all guilty. I can sit and binge through TED Talks for hours on end, but that's not really teaching you that much. It's only really when you've got a topic and you zero in on that topic and you've got laser focus and you maybe take a couple of notes, and then every day you try and apply a little bit here and a little bit there, that knowledge actually starts sticking around enough so that it's actually changing your behavior and it's changing your skill in that particular topic. So that's basically what I think is most important, is to remember that you have to actually use the knowledge. A lot of people, myself included, you get different types of readers. You're going to get your guys that read purely for social reading, and that's completely fine. So we're obviously not talking about that right now. We're talking about reading in the sense of research, or researching a specific topic. And that's not going to serve you that well down the line if you're just going to do my approach, where you read enough so that you then eventually, by virtue of reading enough, you know enough. The quickest way, even for myself, if I can teach myself that, to acquire the actions and the skills from your reading, is to immediately start enforcing the skills. Or something that Manu does quite well is he will go and summarize a book in a couple of bullets or maybe 2 pages, and then have that with him and go back to that and have that as a reference. Isn't that right? I've seen you do that a couple of times, where you carry that with you. Tell us about that. Maybe that can help me.
That's actually, it's funny that you mentioned it, because I haven't actually thought about that at all in discussing this topic. But you're so right. It's something that a month down the line, and this actually became apparent when I was going through this whole property thing, right? I would find myself listening to an entire audiobook of, and this, I'm talking about an 8-hour to 12-hour audiobook on property. I would go and buy the book, I would read the book again, and then I would listen to it again, and then I would assume that I would retain all of that knowledge. But then analyzing my first deal, and then going through the different steps in my brain, and I'm thinking, what the hell is the next step? I can't remember. And going back on audiobooks, yes, that didn't work for me, because obviously you can bookmark certain things, but it's not as easy as quickly referencing or turning a page or going through your notes and all that. So it's something that I started a couple of months ago, maybe even a year ago or so, where I said that I'm just going to try this out. I'm going to just write down some of the bullet points in some of the chapters that resonate with me, something that I want to actually remember going forward, and then I can just refer back to my notes, and in that case there I would be able to retain that information and apply it to my own life as well. So I started doing that, but then as always, Leon, with everything that I do, I get carried away. So I ended up summarizing my books that I read, because everything in a book is just so interesting, and there's so much of it that you want to retain, that you want to remember. So I find myself sometimes actually drawing an entire timeline of the entire book and doing bullet points of saying that in chapter 1 these are the highlights, in chapter 2, but I rewrite it in my own words. So it's basically rewriting the books, and I'm not saying everyone should do this, but it's something that really helps me a lot to go back and say that I remember that I read it in this book. Let me quickly go back to my notes and just go and check on that one chapter on how to go and apply this, because in a lot of these books they will give you step-by-step guides on how to do certain things, on how to negotiate, what sort of tactics you could use, and that's just in real estate. But I mean in overall, there's so much knowledge that you can apply in your own life as well, and that really, to be honest, inspired this show. I think that to a very, very large degree inspired the show, because I sat down one day and I was like, there's so much information that we consume, but I don't ever know what is applicable and how I can go and translate that into real action steps. So we'll touch a little bit more on that towards the end of the show once again, as we always do. But it's something that just really helped me out a lot, is summarizing those bullet points of a specific book and then referencing back to it to some degree and seeing how I can actually turn that into an action step as well.
So I've got a top tip for our users out there, and it's something that I use quite often. So I'm assuming by you listening to this podcast that you are a listener of various different types of podcasts. And I'm pretty sure you found yourself in the same situation as I do. I've got about a 1 hour commute to the office, in and out. And I'll be listening to a podcast and hearing something very interesting, or maybe someone's quoting a book and I want to remember the name of the book and the author. And I can never remember those things. I just don't have that kind of brain. So Martin actually introduced me to a little application called Trello. So this is just a tip for the users out there or the listeners out there. Trello is a very interesting solution that allows you to create lists and to-dos and whatever. But what I typically use it for is pretty much just remembering stuff every now and again. And unfortunately, I'm not going to preach to the Android users now, but if you have an iPhone, for example, you can actually program a shortcut. So just go and YouTube what I'm going to say now, because I can't really go into the technical details on this show. It's going to bore the rest of us. But you can create a shortcut that once you press it, it takes a voice recording and you just say, remember, the book, it starts with Y from Simon Sinek. And then it will automatically create a new little entry inside your Trello that you can then later on go back to. And I use that a hell of a lot. I even use that when my wife asks me to go and buy something from the store and I need to make a shopping list, because she'll usually ask me like to get 4 things and I'll remember 3. I know I'll never remember all 4. So I'll quickly just click that one little button, create a shortcut where it voice recognizes and creates a little clip that then, puts it into my Trello. But that's just a little top tip, something that I found that works for me, especially while I'm driving and I don't really want to do more than just, clicking on a button on my screen, and then it allows me to just take that little snippet, put it somewhere for later.
I love that. I think, when I introduced you to the application or to the virtual app or website called Trello. By the way, guys, if you guys want to go and check it out, I will link it in the show notes, trello.com. Again, we are not affiliated with any of these tools that we share. We merely just love sharing knowledge and love sharing tools and things that work for us. So I'm really glad you brought that up, Leon. You actually caught me off guard there. Once again, wow. Such a powerful app. The way that I came about knowing about it is I actually checked it out I came across it in one specific course. Funny enough, we're talking about knowledge. I was taking a project management course at some point in my life. And one of the things, I never even finished the course because they mentioned Trello and I was like, oh yeah, let me go check it out. Knowledge is potential power, so I should go and get experience with this tool. It's absolutely free. Go to Trello.com. We will link it in the show notes as well. And there is a mobile app available for it, but you can also access it on your web browser. Trello.com was such a great discovery for me because it allowed me to take a lot of my knowledge, funny enough, and convert that into actions, convert that into real life action steps for myself. And strange enough, we're actually looking at a Trello board right now. That's what we're using.
Yes, that's right.
For managing the show and managing the show notes and summaries and bullet points and all of those things. So it's a project management app, and it sounds really intimidating when you think about it like that. But I promise you, it's super easy to use, and it really helps me. I've got Trello boards for pretty much every aspect of my life. I've got Trello boards for my studies that I do. I've got Trello boards for managing my personal to-do lists. I've got Trello boards for planning vacations and all of that. And you can really turn all of those things into action steps. So for really touching on the topic of today, in the sense that we are focusing on how can we apply action steps and convert our knowledge into skills.
So the whole point of actually converting your knowledge into skills is because knowledge in its own, as we've now said, is not power. It doesn't serve you. It doesn't serve anyone. And when I say it doesn't serve you, that sounds very selfish. But the point of knowledge being converted into skills, the long-term goal is to actually be selfless with your knowledge and in giving back and empowering others. Knowledge converted into skills is empowering. It's something that really empowers you. For example, if you're a skydiver and you just one day decided to start watching videos about skydiving, and you say, all right, listen, I'm going to start getting my license to have other people jump with me. And you convert that knowledge into a skill that gets customers to come and have that experience with you. You're actually now empowering other people with your skill that you've developed just from skydiving. Something as simple as jumping out of a plane with a big net. Well, not a net, a big, kite.
Yeah.
Parachute. A kite wouldn't work. So the whole point of if you look at the whole cycle, so that, I'm going around a little bit here, but you start with the point of knowledge, you consume the knowledge, you then start actioning upon the knowledge. All right. And once you've created enough action, that action becomes permanent, which then means it's a skill. And then once you've got skill, it means you've found empowerment. And once you've empowered, it means that you know so much about something that you can give that empowerment out to others to enjoy it as well, or to maybe spark an interest, or to maybe better someone's life, or whatever the case might be. You'll find that that's kind of the undertone of a lot of the things that we'll discuss in this podcast, is that everything we do and the knowledge that we gain is a means to an end. And that means is basically eventually finding ourselves in a position where us and sharing of knowledge actually does help someone out there. Even if it helps one person, that's good enough. And I'm not talking about our one listener, my mom. I'm talking about, hopefully by now, the others as well that's joined in. So yeah, absolutely. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Especially you're saying that giving back and how it empowers you on giving that and paying that knowledge forward as well. That is something that has been at the core of my being, even just as I left school, that I discovered and I'm talking a lot about my career path and all of that, but it's something that I've only recently realized sparked my interest in my career, is when I consumed that information, very technical, very complex information. I was always looking for ways to explain that or carry over that knowledge into other people's lives when they're really struggling. So especially touching on the industry that we're in the tech space. So it's all IT this and IT that, and technology and computers and processes and random access memory and all of these great things that you hear, all of these abbreviations, right? But for me, that was so much empowerment, in the sense that I could now fix my own things. I could now get to the point where I can build computers from scratch, put the pieces together, all of those things. I could pretty much get, if anyone came up to me and asked me, Mono, I'm struggling with my PC. I don't know what's going on. It keeps crashing, or it's hanging, it's slow. Anything like that, I could actually go and sit in front of it without needing to know anything about what the history of the machine is, or what the history of the computer is, or who the user is and what they downloaded, what they clicked on, and I could dissect that entire thing and fix the problem. So for me, that was something that was so empowering in my own personal life, because that would mean that I would never ever have to sit with a slow computer ever again. And that was very important. Sure. But also paying that knowledge forward, in the sense that if others came up to me and they said, but how did you do that? Because that's always the thing, a technician hears when they walk away, is how did you do it? How did you fix it? And then you can try and explain to them, and most people just say, oh no, don't worry, you won't get it, I've fixed it. But for me, that's something that I always try to at least convey. So I would always try and simplify what I just did, or what caused the issue, and try and repeat that repeat it to them in a sense that they would actually understand. And that's the one thing that knowledge does for a person, right? Is once it empowers you to the level where you can, and we all consume knowledge in a different way. So we all interpret messages in different way and make connotations to our personal lives, and all of those things come into the place. So we all have different spins on the information that we consume.
No, 100%. And the thing that you touched on now that's actually quite interesting, and I just want to throw it in here before I forget, It just came to me now. But another thing that a lot of people do, and I've actually seen this in the company we work for a few times, I've seen it in previous companies, I've seen it so many times in my life, is that a lot of people see acquiring of skill through the meticulous consumption of knowledge is owned by them, and that they hold it very dear and they don't feel like sharing it. And I mean, I'm not, if you are that person, I'm not saying that I'm hating on that. I just think that you'll find consuming knowledge with the intention of putting it into action and developing a skill set a lot more rewarding when you actually start creating little followers and people that actually learned from you, and people that you were able to empower through your knowledge and through your action. I mean, we are from South Africa. If you're listening from this and maybe from another country, there's so much to be done in this country as far as knowledge sharing and skill development and stuff like that is concerned. And there's so many of us that walk around, like myself and Manu. I'm not saying we're the smartest people, but with a lot of information and knowledge and skills, that if I had the ability to just share it with mass people, like we are attempting to do with this podcast, you can hopefully spark something. And I mean, if you do it with 1 or 2 people, that will be enough. For me, at least, that would make this whole thing worthwhile. So what I'm trying to say is, if you are a knowledgeable person and your knowledge becomes a skill set, pass it on. Give it to someone else that might be inquiring about it. I've got a very good example. My one family friend, he's a builder, and he basically builds onto people's houses, and he'll give you a car park, or maybe he'll do a swimming pool. So he does that. He's been doing it for several years, and through doing that, he's gotten a plumber's diploma. He's got his building certificate. He's registered as a proper builder, so that you can put his plans through the, the necessary legal processes and everything. And he pays it forward. There's so many of his mates that aren't doing so well that he then starts training. He's like, listen, can you work? Do you have arms and legs? Do you know how to use a shovel? All right, cool. I'll teach you how to lay a brick. And if you can lay that one brick, I'll teach you how to lay 20 bricks. And then I'm going to teach you how to lay 1,000 bricks in a day. And if I can get you that far and you haven't quit yet, then I'm going to teach you how to build a wall. And once I've taught you how to build a wall, I'm going to teach you how to put the electricity inside and give it the finishes and everything. And if that person has stuck around for all of that, he knows that there's a certain type of character that he can deal with. And that person immediately becomes a subcontractor to him, which then gives him a little bit of finances to start building his own little thing. And before you know it, they become their own builders and their own entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. And they don't compete for business. I mean, this guy that I'm talking about, he's made his customers. He's got a name for himself. So he's selfless with his knowledge, and he's empowering other builders to become builders and entrepreneurs. And I find it so amazing, because he can easily say, the world is too small, and every single inquiry about building in this area, I want it all for myself. He doesn't do that. He also doesn't want co-ownership of any people or anything. He wants to have just enough projects to keep him happy and satisfied and keep the bank account fairly good. And that's all he wants. The rest, there's enough sun to shine on everyone. So the rest, he passes it on. He enables other people to do the same work he does in the same area, and he doesn't even see it as a threat. So take the knowledge, apply it, action it, get it to a skill level, and then pass it on. If you see someone that's going to do it justice, pass it on.
Wow, I think, yes, 2 things on that. In episode 3, we discussed creating a meaningful life, and we touched on the 4 pillars of what Emily in her TED talk refers to as the 4 pillars of creating a meaningful life. And just thinking about that in itself got me thinking back to when I was thinking about what is the meaning of life, and doing a lot of research on how to build a meaningful life and how to create a purposeful life as well. And to me, that one thing was to say, the one thing that I want to leave behind, even if I could not leave behind a massive pool of cash for my kids or my grandkids, or massive multi-million-dollar Fortune 500 companies, or whatever the case is, for me, the one thing that I do want to do in my life that creates purpose in my life as well is to share my knowledge. And that's partly the reason that why we're here, as we mentioned, but it's also how I live my life in the little ways, right? And in saying, these little things that I can contribute on a day-to-day basis. And sometimes it's not easy because not everyone will be skilled up to a level where they can understand it. So you might want to trim it down on the context or the technical lingo then to try and make it more understandable, more relatable to a certain extent. So, but that's the one thing that I try and at least leave behind is sharing my knowledge, whether it is how to do your taxes, and I've just learned how to do that, or whether it is how to fit a globe inside my specific brand or make or model of my car. Those type of things, if someone comes to me and they want to know how to do that, I am just not the person that will hold on to that amount of knowledge and just sit on it to be scared that maybe they're going to get out ahead of you as well. In corporate, you see that happening a lot where, and I think that's what you were referring to, Leon, the fact that people will go through a certain course or they will have a vast amount of experience in one specific field. And if you go and ask them how to fix that or how to do this one specific task, they will just hold on to it, or they will share as little as possible information on that topic so that you don't ever come and take their jobs. I don't know what the reasoning, maybe that is, because some people might feel that you will become a threat, and they had to work very hard to get to the point where they are, to consume the amount of knowledge and to apply that as a skill set. And they might be scared that they're giving you a shortcut to life. So that actually takes me to the second point that I wanted to mention on that as well. But Zig Ziglar had this saying that said, you can have everything that you want in life if you just help enough people to get what they want. And that's what Leon is talking about as well, I think, is saying that the more you help people, the more you give back, in the sense of your knowledge that you have consumed, even though you feel that you might be you're stabbing yourself in the back in a certain aspect, because if the job opportunity does open up, someone else might come in and sweep in with the knowledge that you've shared with them and take advantage of that opportunity and leave you high and dry. But I feel that in that sense there, you can have everything that you want in life if you just get it, help enough people to get what they want by sharing the knowledge and helping them get to their destiny.
No, absolutely. And I mean, I just want to touch on something before we probably need to close. But if you feel that insecure in the knowledge and sharing thereof at your workplace, then maybe you aren't at the right place. Or maybe you're not working for the right type of manager. I've shared a lot of information with colleagues throughout the years, and I've never ever personally had a situation where that knowledge was then used to get a head or shoulder above me.
Exactly.
Instead, if you do it in the right way, and again, it comes down to, I think when we're done with this podcast in hopefully never, but if you listen to all of our stories and chats, you'll eventually see a theme developing where it's all about you as a person and your character. So if that person at work is asking you for help with something, and you haven't had a strong enough character and demeanor leading up to that event, and they haven't respected you, there is that chance, I assume. It's never happened to me, but I can think of some scenarios where that person could then be conniving and using it against you because he doesn't respect you, or maybe your character is not strong enough, so he saw a gap and he was able to exploit it. But if you actually have that kind of character and that caring personality trait, usually most people, and again, I'm not saying it's 100% ironclad, but most people won't exploit that information. They just need that information to get across a bump in the road. So share the information. It doesn't blow up in your face. It hasn't in mine. It hasn't in minus from my knowledge. And I can see some extreme cases where that might happen. But at the end of the day, if that does happen, then that's a lesson learned, and you move on from that, and you obviously know what to look out for the next person that happens with. So anyways, a last thing that I wanted to mention, I don't know, Manu, did you want to add something?
Yeah, so people are good by nature. It's been proven over and over again. By
Yes.
nature, we are good beings. We want to do good. Everybody wants to do good. So by thinking that someone's out to get you, just by sharing that knowledge, might actually change that whole person's perspective of you as as an individual in itself, and that would switch or flip the whole script around as well. I've come across a lot of people that I hated or disliked, not hated, but disliked, and then they share and they're open with sharing their knowledge, and instantly I gain respect for that person.
Yes, that's true. And I mean, at the end of the day, if you're not willing to share knowledge, don't expect the same courtesy in future from others. That's the other thing. So paying it forward, eventually you'll receive. I mean, that's kind of the circle that we are talking about. So if you give knowledge away, you'll also receive knowledge. And that's just how the universe works. So when it comes to knowledge, just maybe a closing statement from my side, just maybe another tip, because we did say that we'll give tips on the show as well. But when you deal with knowledge, you should just basically follow the 3 A's, and I cannot take credit for this. This is from Damien Balderrama. He was on one of the TEDx Reading events, and he said that you need to follow the 3 A's, or he calls it the A's to the power of 3. Ask, answer, and act. So basically, first thing you need to do is you need to ask yourself, how is this knowledge applicable to my life, and what is it going to serve me? Why do I need it? Then quite simply, you need to answer that question. So let's say, for example, I want to acquire knowledge on how to make my own knives, and I've got a pocket knife collection, and I want to start being a small little blacksmith and create my own knives. The answer is very simple. I want to create it because it gives me joy, and I enjoy it, and maybe I can even sell it, etc., etc. And then simply you need to act on it. And by acting, I mean, when they explain how to create a knife, okay, I need a belt saw, I need a file, I need some raw materials, I need some, and you act and you go and get those things and you start building your first knife. And your first knife will probably suck, and it's going to be duller than maybe the dullest butter knife in your kitchen. But you will create a second knife, and that second knife will get better. And then you'll create a third knife, and you can even maybe charge money for that. And by the end of it, by again repeatedly actioning, you'll create a skill. And once you've got a skill, you'll eventually be able to provide or to create knives or make knives that's worthy of someone else carrying it. And then later on in life, that knowledge becomes experience, and that experience can then be used to empower others. So you can pass that skill on to your son one day to be a small blacksmith at home making knives.
Yes, so knowledge is converted into skills through experience. That's the one key takeaway here today. If just to summarize all of the action steps, guys, thank you so much for listening to this episode. The action steps are simply this: gain power by taking action. Knowledge isn't power in itself. We asked that question right in the beginning. Damien talked about it in his TED Talk. You have to take action in order to make that knowledge or convert that knowledge into power. And then one or two others that I do want to leave with you, action steps, is make sure that in this week or in this month or in this time to come, be cognizant and be aware of the knowledge that you are consuming, and ask yourself, is this the right type of knowledge? Is this actually taking me to my goal? There's so much information that we're consuming on a daily basis that it might all just be white noise. So make sure that you try and focus your knowledge to attain or to at least attain a specific skill. And then lastly is share your knowledge. Share your knowledge and pay it forward, because paying it forward to just one single person could mean that you end up paying that forward to 10 or 15 or 30 or 100 or 5,000 other people in turn, because that one person that you've empowered will now go ahead and start empowering the rest of them. Guys, girls, ladies and gents, thank you so much for listening to the 5th episode of the Real Life Tips or Tools or Tricks podcast. From myself, Mono.
And myself, Leon, this was a lot of fun, man. I enjoyed it. We debunked it. So knowledge is not power. Applied knowledge is power. So Really, really enjoyed the episode. I hope you did too. Leave us a like or a comment or something. Rate the show. Go look at the show notes. We'll link a couple of the tips like Trello and the others in the show notes. Share it with your friends if you think this is going to help someone else. Again, like we just said, share the knowledge, share the love, share the show, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Cheers, guys. Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining this episode. We really hope that it inspires and motivates you. By the way, we're giving away a free 5-step personal budget template that will help you take control of your financial goals. So just head over to rltstudios.com, sign up for our newsletter, and we will get that right over to you. So head over to rltstudios.com and we will see you in the next episode. Until then, cheers.